stories about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. There's something that we've been piecing together in the past 50 or 100 episodes of Ideanthro, or more specifically in a couple of the last 50 or 100 episodes of Ideanthro, that we've been piecing together with a few different anecdotes and observations of bioretention systems around southeast Queensland. And that is exactly how and when moss grows in bioretention systems. Now, most recently we talked about this in episode 251 with a very clear example of how both available water and sunlight influence where moss will grow in bioretention systems. And we were out at the Wakely bioretention system, which is asset number B00028 on the Woosod map. Google the Woosod map if you haven't heard about it before. We're out at the Wakely bioretention system, and really clear example of this, where you come down a bank and then you come across the surface, then you go on the canopy, and you have all these different degrees of moisture and not moisture, and light and lack of light, and moss in some parts and not in others. So you can check that out in episode 251. And so that gave a really quite a good understanding of this. But there was something I'd seen in another site, which I know is Bignonia Close, which is in Heathwood in Brisbane. It's asset number B00018. So the first one was 00028, this one's 00018. And at this particular site, there was something going on here that was just puzzling me a little bit. And in a second, we're going to use a photograph to have a look at that. But this was actually the very first site where I started to spot and started to investigate this quite a while back on Ideanthro. Anyway, the point being, here is a photograph of this particular site today. It's a photograph of the system in the wet. And what you can pick up here is that there are a number of lomandras in the system, but there are also gaps between them. And in some of those gaps, you can see water, and you can see that in those gaps, the surface appears darker. Now, you have to take my word for this. That is not just because the water's there and it's changed the color of the filter media because the light's playing off it in a funny way. The surface of the filter media where the water is in fact, for the most part, darker than the surface of the system where there's no water in this shot. So we have essentially in the back of the shot, no water and quite sandy and light colored. Then in the foreground of the shot, we have water and it's darker colored, but take my word for it, that even when there's not water there, it's darker colored at that point. In fact, if you look in the bottom right corner of the shot, you should be able to see a little bit that's darker colored and no moisture sitting there. And in those areas that are darker colored is where typically in this system, and it's hard to see that because we're so far away with this shot, but it's typically in those spots where we start to see moss growing in this particular system. And I'd been puzzled as to exactly what was going on, as to why there was no moss growing on the lighter portions of the filter media, and why there was on the darker portions, but obviously the moss was part of what might have been making it darker. And at a high conceptual level here, I had recognized that, okay, look, there's a couple of things that are different here. Firstly, in the darker areas, there tend to be more lomandras growing closer together, so there might be a little bit less sunlight getting into those spots than into the lighter areas. So maybe there's too much sunlight. So maybe too much sunlight is either drying things out too much, or maybe too much sunlight, literally the plant just doesn't want that much and it's getting baked directly. So maybe there is enough moisture in the filter media that the plant's getting hit too much with too much sunlight and is getting baked off, the moss I should say. But I wasn't 100% sure. I had some hypotheses about what was going on. But seeing this system today in a rainfall event, because I was out filming for our upcoming, I promise it's coming, bioretention in the real world course, turns out when you decide to put together a really comprehensive course, it takes an awfully long time to edit all the video, to film it and edit it. Anyway, we're out here in a rainfall event. In fact, in the photograph, you can see a GoPro sitting in the filter media on a tripod. We were out in this system filming. And so I saw it in a rainfall event. In fact, I saw it in several successive showers that came through, system filled, dried back down. Another shower came through, kind of filled it a bit, dried it back down. And these were not long showers, but quite intense. They're the sort of thing that probably dumped in the order of 10 mils of rain on the catchment, enough to, at an intensity enough that on the Bureau of Meteorology's radar, it was showing up as yellow on the radar. So moderately intense, not crazy. It's the sort of thing that suggests in the order of 20 or maybe a little bit more millimeters per hour in terms of intensity. And duration, yeah, it probably wasn't quite half an hour, so we're probably in the 5 to 10 mils range, but not insignificant, and came in quite quickly with a bit of intensity. And in each case, what happened was water started coming into the inlet, and then it preferentially flowed all around the darker areas of this. So what it turns out that I hadn't picked before is that the darker areas in this shot are ever so slightly lower than the lighter coloured bits of filter media in this shot. And that starts to become a little bit more obvious now when you look at this shot, because look, the lomandras in the foreground are so much bigger and healthier and darker green, and the ones in the background are much lighter in colour. And so I don't know exactly the order of operation here, but it seems to be that for whatever reason, we are now at a situation where the darker bits of filter media are sank just, the surfaces are sank just slightly lower in the landscape than the lighter bits, which means they get preferentially more water onto them. And so that means they appear like they're probably a little bit moister, which is a little bit better for the moss to grow. So perhaps it's crossed the threshold into being moist enough. But at the same time, it also means, because there's more water getting to those parts of the filter media, that those lomandras are healthier, so they're growing bigger, so they're getting up and providing a bit more shade, but not total shade to the gaps. So maybe they're also stopping a threshold of, like if you cut out those lomandras, it'd be interesting to see whether the moss that is on those bits of filter media might die off and go away, because suddenly it might have too much sunlight. So it's interesting how there's an interplay. Now, I can't tell you the order this has happened. I can't tell you, for example, whether preferential flow paths developed, which caused moss to grow a bit better, caused there to be more moisture, caused the lomandras to grow up more, or it happened in that direction, or whether the lomandras grew really well in this area for some particular reason, which caused water to be channeled through some smaller areas, which caused some erosion, which then dropped those areas and made more water get there and less to the other area. I can't tell you what order of operation happened here, but we can spot some interesting interplay and dynamics and system that's happening here, and that's ultimately resulting in, well, these bits of the media are darker and have some moss on them, and these bits don't and appear to be drier and sandier and have plants that are less matured and more yellowed off and appear to be a little bit drought stressed. So as usual, anecdote is the plural of anecdote is not data, right? So again, this is us interpreting these things from single sites as we go, but nonetheless it's interesting, because if you observe this enough and over time and spot the nuances, you can start to pick up an accurate understanding of what's going on. I hope you found that interesting. If you want to be able to dig in more to bioretention systems, if you want to see lots and lots of case studies and worked examples of bioretention systems where you get presented with a bioretention system and get posed some questions about it, you have to interpret it the way we did here, then by all means take a look at our bioretention in the real world course when we get it out. It's not quite there yet, but take a look at it. I will flash a URL up on the screen now where you can go and see a little bit of a placeholder there. By all means, check it out, because this is the sort of thing, this ability to interpret bioretention. It's one thing to know, it's one thing to be able to go, look, a bioretention system is this, and it has filter media that's this deep, and these sorts of plants in it. It's one thing to be able to do that, and that is super important. But if you actually want to be useful with bioretention systems, you have to be able to interpret them as systems like we're talking about here. And it's a continual learning journey, at least at present, because we don't yet know everything about bioretention systems. But this course, this bioretention in the real world course, when we get it out, is exactly about that. How you interpret systems in the real world to understand them as systems, and then you can manage them as systems with some real understanding of what's going on and not just applying stock standard out-of-the-box maintenance practices that may or may not be appropriate. Okay, I've waxed lyrical enough about that. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, observations, thoughts on this, I would love to hear them. By all means, hit me up either in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, or you can contact me at jack.mullally@ideanthro.com, or you can go to ideanthro.com, scroll to the bottom and sign up for the newsletter, and you get these videos in your inbox every week as they're released. Okay, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.